2022 provincial election debate. I'm Kyle Burgess, Chair of the Newmarket Chamber of Commerce. This year, we are honored to be presenting this event in partnership with local media Newmarket Today and the Newmarket-Aurora YorkRegion.com. I want to begin this evening in a good way by acknowledging the land that we live and work on. This is an important step on our path of truth and towards reconciliation, which is the work of all Canadians. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, whose presence here continues to this day. We also would like to acknowledge this is the unceded treaty lands of the First Nation of the Williams Treaty, and thank the signatory nations respectively for sharing these lands with us. We would also like to acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest First Nation community, and extend the hand of partnership to them so we can live in a good way and in accordance with our treaty agreements. We are all treaty people and we all have responsibilities to the treaty agreements. I invite you to find out more about the treaty that you live on and consider not only the way that the land shows up to you, but how you can show up for the land to live in reciprocity. Elections matter, and I want to thank our candidates for being here tonight to share their vision for this riding and Ontario. It should be noted that all candidates who filed to run in Newmarket-Aurora were invited to participate this evening. Seated on the stage are, from left to right, Ivana Tsezneska with the New Blue Party, Dennis Heng with Ontario NDP, Carolina Rodriguez with the Green Party of Ontario, and Sylvain Roy with the Ontario Liberal Party. Please give all candidates a round of applause for putting their name forward. We are streaming tonight's event via Zoom, so welcome to those who are joining us remotely as well. Our panel of questioners tonight join us from our media partners that I mentioned earlier. Joseph Quigley from Newmarket Today and Lisa Queen from the Newmarket-Aurora YorkRegion.com. On the far side of the stage is our moderator for this evening, is Peter Stirrup. He is the headmaster of Pickering College. As well, he is supported by Abdus Samad, Newmarket Chamber of Commerce's Director of Government Relations and Policy as our timer. Without further ado, let's commence this evening's debate. I hand it over to you, Peter, to start everything off.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Good evening and welcome to the Newmarket-Aurora provincial election debate. As Kyle indicated, we have a number of questions tonight for our candidates. Many have been submitted by residents from the community directly. Many themes have emerged and our panel will do their best to... Oh. Hello? Does that work? Sorry. Many themes have emerged and our panel will do their best to ensure all candidates have an opportunity to be heard. To ensure this is the case, I have with me, as Kyle mentioned, Abdus Samad, Director of Government Relations and Policy for the Newmarket Chamber of Commerce. When candidates have 10 seconds remaining in their allotted time, he will press a button that will illuminate a red light on a little box down there that only the candidates can see. We will ask them to complete their comments, and I will then cut off any candidates if they continue beyond the remaining 10 seconds. Our evening is broken up into themes as well as question types. Our goal is to ensure that all candidates are given the chance to share their positions and that they will be able to challenge other candidates and their party's positions. The three question segments that we'll be employing tonight are as follows. First, initial questions on our themes will be posed to all candidates and they will each have 45 seconds to respond. Our media panel will pose these questions and may ask specific follow-up questions if they believe the audience would like clarity, and candidates will then have up to 15 seconds to respond to the follow-up. There will also be face-to-face debate questions where we have pre-selected two candidates to directly engage with each other. The first candidate will have 45 seconds to respond, followed by 35 seconds for the second candidate, and finally, the initial candidate will have 15 seconds to rebut. And finally, throughout the debate, we have inserted rapid response questions or snappers. These are questions that we will only allow for a yes or no answer. We've spent considerable time assembling questions and themes that have been submitted. We've also worked hard to ensure equal time for the candidates, as well have balanced evenly the number of times a candidate will answer first, second, third, or fourth. With all of that being said, let's now begin tonight's debate with our first round of questions from our media panel. And the first theme for this evening is healthcare, and I'll ask Lisa to start us off.
Thanks, Peter. Good evening, candidates. The ongoing pandemic has highlighted gaps in our healthcare system. What tangible commitments is your party making to improve Ontario's healthcare system? And the first question goes to Dennis.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes, I think that the pandemic has really shown the vulnerabilities within our healthcare system. But I think it's very important to note that these aren't new problems. These are problems that started 20 years ago because of the lack of investment in our public services. What the NDP will do with regards to this is we're going to be funding hospitals. We're going to be getting rid of hallway medicine that was started by the Liberals. And what we're really going to be doing is we're trying to fix the system that has been neglected and broken over the past 20 years. With respect to this, we will be introducing universal mental health care. The idea that mental health care is health care and that we should not be paying with it for a credit card. We'll be looking at dental care, pharmacare, and really looking at the system as a whole.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Thanks. Next up is Sylvan.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm a healthcare professional myself, and I've seen the system fall apart and crumble in front of me. The current Conservative government is trying to build a house without a strong foundation. So the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to, for example, raising the personal support worker base salary to $25 per hour. We will repeal Bill 124. We will work hard at clearing the surgical and diagnostic backlog and invest $1 billion into that. We'll invest $2 billion into seniors cares, $3 billion in reducing mental health wait times, for example, and train new mental health workers, including social workers and psychologists, psychotherapists. And one thing I'm particularly thoughtful about is the opioid crisis and the need to invest into prevention, intervening, and treating opioid addictions and overdoses. More importantly, we will reinforce the backbone of healthcare and seniors care in Ontario by training, recruit, and retaining healthcare workers. And we will fight hard to conserve this plan to privatize hospitals.
Thank you. Next up is Carolina.
Yes, thank you for the question. As Dennis had said, we have seen a lot of gaps in our healthcare system, and that started way before the pandemic, and the pandemic made it no easier. So we need to start by investing in our healthcare system that was divested from so many years ago. We not only need to invest in the infrastructure that we depend on to house our healthcare workers and those that need care, but the workers within. We need to repeal Bill 124 and ensure that people are paid fairly for the work that they do. We need to make sure that we hire more nurses and doctors and people to actually take care of us when we're sick. We can't continue to divest from our critical healthcare system. Southlake, for example, it needs more investment. It needs a new building to be able to support the growing population of Newmarket and those surrounding, and as well as our aging population. So we need to invest in our long-term care systems and our PSWs. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Ivana.
Thank you. It's working. Okay, so I want to add to what Dennis said. These are problems that we've had in our. Hello?
Yeah.
Thank you. So to add to what Dennis said, these issues in our healthcare system have existed for a long time. And I think the pandemic revealed the cracks that we have in our healthcare system. I think we need to take a grassroots approach and speak to frontline workers and see where we can effectively, efficiently, and affordably fix some of the problems that exist and have existed for a long time in our healthcare system. We also want to end the mandates and rehire everyone wrongfully fired because of the mandates. and get back to base zero before COVID by giving the professionals the resources they need to clear the backlog. Our party recognizes healthcare as a primary responsibility of government. We need to identify mismanaged areas of government and allocate the funds to increase the overall healthcare budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivana. We'll now move, thank you all candidates, and take a deep breath now. We're through the first initial stages. We're now going to move into our face-to-face debates. When our media panel asks the question, they will indicate the party that will initially respond with the 45-second response, and the second candidate who will have up to 35 seconds. And don't forget, the initial candidate will then have 15 seconds to rebut. So the first face-to-face will be from Joseph.
Thank you. This question goes to Ivana first, and Dennis, you will have the chance to respond. Would you support making permanent an increase to wages for nurses and PSWs? Ivana?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the first part.
Certainly. Would
Thank
you
you.
support making permanent an increase to wages for nurses and personal support workers?
Yes, I think it is important to look at the nurses and healthcare workers that left during the pandemic, not only affected by the mandates, but affected by exhaustion and have left to other careers, I suppose you could say. We need to entice the healthcare workers back into our healthcare system. And we can do that by increasing salaries and wages. Thank you.
Dennis? Dennis, rebuttal?
You know what? There's not much to rebut there. I totally agree. I think this is something where it starts off with the whole idea of healthcare heroes. We need to put our money where our mouth is. And I think that starts off with repealing Bill 124. I believe in the collective bargaining process, and it doesn't seem fair or just to me if we have a government that says, hey, you're going to collectively bargain, but we're only going to have a 1% cap here. I think that we really need to have a discussion as a society to say, how much do we really value our healthcare workers, because they are the lifeblood of the hospitals and long-term care homes, not just the buildings, and that we have to have an honest discussion about this.
Thank you, Dennis.
And Ivana, you have one more chance to, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I think as well, we need to allow healthcare workers to be part of the conversation when we're putting funding into our healthcare system, and see where the cracks in the system are, to be able to, as I mentioned earlier, create an affordable, effective, and efficient
Thank
healthcare
you,
system.
Ivana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is going to be with Carolina and with Sylvan. How do you propose to deal with significant backlog of needed procedures? Carolina, your turn first.
I mean, this starts with investing in our healthcare system as well, not just the infrastructure, but the people themselves who work there, the professionals that are needed to perform these surgery backlogs. We need more doctors to be able to perform them. We also need more spaces in our ORs, and not only to perform the surgeries themselves, but other services that have been neglected because of the surgery backlog. So a lot of long-term care workers, long-term care homes have been overflowing, and a lot of older people have had to stay in the hospitals instead of long-term care homes, or instead at home with personal support workers. So with that, we need to invest in all areas of our healthcare system, not only the surgeries themselves, but everything that surrounds them and affects the surgeries as well. We need to make sure we repeal that Bill 124 to ensure that people can earn a living wage with our system that we have in place and are not
Thank you, Carolina.
overworked.
Sylvan?
Again, not much of a rebuttal there, because I agree with most of what was said. The pandemic has highlighted that our workforce was strained. We need to invest heavily in our workforce, because they're the ones that are the backbone of our system, and that they're going to be the ones doing the procedures. 2 points maybe to add is the modernizing the infrastructure that needs to happen, that requires investments, and digital health technology to make sure we have things like bed matching and so on that's available as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and Carolina, would you like to add anything?
Not much to add, but I agree. I think we're living in a different world now than we were 2 years ago, and technology will help us a long way and can reduce some spending and put that back into the pockets of their doctors and nurses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This next question goes to Dennis. Sylvain, you'll have a chance to respond. The pandemic highlighted the poor state of our long-term care sector. What would your party specifically do to improve long-term care homes and the care of seniors? Dennis?
Great, thank you, Joseph. I think the biggest thing as a public health care professional and an epidemiologist that helped support the COVID-19 response here in New York region, the big thing with the long-term care homes is that really taking the idea of moving it to a nonprofit sector. I saw how the difference between the nonprofit and profit-oriented organizations, we shouldn't have this dynamic where we need profit to be really kind of profit and compassion fighting for one another. So that is the very first thing that we do with long-term care homes. And we recognize that this isn't just a long-term care home, a long-term care home problem. This extends to home care and community care. So the Ontario NDP will also provide the appropriate funding to build out the system that's been broken over the past 20 years so that together we can have a proper flow to have Ontarians age in place.
Thank you, Dennis.
Sylvain, response?
Yeah, I agree. I think I've witnessed it personally and professionally. The long-term care system, again, collapsed right in front of our eyes and the services were not there. So when it comes to seniors, definitely investing in home care. We need to invest and find and recruit people, and we need to end long-term care privatization and really bring that back in the public system. Definitely full-on agreement there as well. And then focus on seniors and invest appropriately in that sector.
Thank you, Sylvain.
Dennis, closing?
I apologize if this is getting very boring, but maybe if there was another candidate here that have provided a different point of view, that would have been helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is with Carolina and with Ivana. And it is a survey by the Mental Health Commissioner of Canada and Conference Board of Canada found 84% of respondents said their mental health concerns grew since the start of the pandemic. What will your party do to address this crisis? And we start with Carolina.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, mental health is health. And if anything that we've learned throughout the pandemic is that everything is not okay here. We need to invest in our mental health. So we need to include mental health in our OHIP services to be able to cover that for those who simply can't afford to pay $130 for an hour of a necessary session. We need to also ensure that other parts of our lives are covered as well, like affordable housing that will significantly improve the mental health of so many Ontarians that are suffering with a housing issue and are forced to be homeless or house independent, and be able to continue with that support that comes not just from our mental health system itself and the doctors, but everything around it. We also need to make sure that we increase green areas of space to be able to walk and relax after a long day or a long week.
Thank you, Carolina.
And Ivana?
Yes, I think mental health is very important for us to look at and to place funding towards. I think it's something that's been ignored during the time of the pandemic. We weren't able to have conversations about the effect that the mandate had on the population, had on children, had on our aging community, had on parents, had on frontline workers. And this is a conversation that we need to start openly having and start putting in funding and taking care of the mental health of the entire population, especially how it was affected by measures put in place during COVID.
Thank you, Ivana.
Thank you. And Carolina?
Yeah, just one thing I want to add is to make sure that we reduce those wait times as well, because it's not only the affordability of the service itself, but the actual possibility of people to be there to serve us and to expand that service as well. So particularly for children and youth, we will be targeting those, especially to reduce the wait time to 30 days.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you all very much for the first round of face-to-face. We're now coming to the hardest question of this round, and that is the snapper, in which you have to answer with a yes or a no. Lisa's going to ask the first snapper.
Yeah, these are always fun. Okay. Do you support the construction of the Bradford bypass? Yes or no only, please. Sylvan,
No.
Dennis,
Hard no.
Ivana,
No.
and Carolina.
No.
Thank you. Well done. Our second theme of the evening is affordability. Lisa will be asking our first question of all the candidates, and a reminder, as you all done very well, that each candidate has 45 seconds to respond.
One of the biggest issues facing Ontarians is affordability, whether it is inflation driving up the cost of living or the skyrocketing cost of housing. What are your plans to help address affordability? And we're going to start with Sylvan.
That's an excellent question. And it's a question that I've heard so many times now at the door, and it's people are hurting and too many people are just being left behind. I think in terms of the housing aspect, we need to start thinking about building and making things more affordable. Reestablishing rent control, for example, would be a good solid start. We have a plan to create the Ontario Home Building Corporation, which will finance and build housing, and will focus on helping first-time home buyers as well to enter the market. But beyond that, making transit affordable, making it increasing ODSP rates, for example, and supporting seniors that need it.
Thank you. Carolina.
Yeah. Affordability is a really big issue, especially here in Newmarket and Aurora, and the housing prices in particular. I will never own a home if this continues this way. So we need to work hard to build those down. And it doesn't just take building more homes and building a supply, but it takes building with a purpose, because it's one thing to have an affordable housing plan, but it's another thing to have an affordable living plan. We need to have not only low tariffs with our public transportation, but access to it, more roads, and more possibility for roads to be covered with public transit, interregional and both within the region as well. We need to increase the minimum wage, because minimum wage is not a livable wage in here at Newmarket and Aurora. We need to ensure that we work toward universal basic income, as well as doubling ODSP rate, not only increasing, but doubling it to make sure that people actually can live the way that they need to live here.
Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you. Ivana.
So, sorry, can you say the question again?
Can, but I have to flip back, so give me a second.
My apologies.
One of the biggest issues facing Ontarians is affordability, whether it is inflation driving up the cost of living or the skyrocketing cost of housing. What are your plans to help address affordability?
Okay, well, I don't think that we can, I don't think the solution here is a shopping list. I think we need to increase prosperity through education. We need to lower taxes. We need to increase purchasing power of citizens and to give them the ability to spend their own money, as well as reduce taxes. If we have purchasing power, we'll have more affordability and prosperity.
Thank you. And Dennis, over to you.
Yeah. I think this is a really complex issue that requires concerted efforts along multiple fronts, right? I think one of the things that the NDP will do immediately is regulating gas prices. One of the big things about cost of living and inflation affecting us now as a society is that we're so based in our supply chains on fossil fuels. And I don't think that doubling down on fossil fuels for the next 20, 30, 40 years is the way we should be going. We really need to lean into this whole idea of a green economy. And that means building affordable housing along complete communities, along public transit routes. And the idea of providing affordable housing at all levels of income. So with regards to that, we believe that we need a system fix here. This isn't something that we're going to solve in the next 3 months. This is something that we need to really build towards sustainable solutions.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, candidates. We're now going to move into the face-to-face portion again, and Joseph will take the first question.
This question is for you, Ivana. Sylvain, you'll have the chance to respond. On housing, what are specific measures the province can be doing to increase housing supply? Ivana?
I mean, housing is an important issue that we're all struggling with, and affordability. It's a multi-layered issue that needs to be looked at on all levels of government. We need to look at supply. We need to look at reducing the cost of the build, and we need to look at inflation. When we have inflated prices on the cost of the goods that we use to manufacture and build homes, and we don't have high value and high wage jobs to put money into citizens' pockets to be able to purchase homes, we have a big problem. And so we need to look at this on all different levels in order to increase supply, but as well allow citizens to have purchasing power to afford these homes in the near future.
Sylvain?
I struggle with the idea of leaving it to the markets to regulate itself. We've seen over the past few years that it's been ballooning out of control. And for housing, I think we do need government to step in and find ways, clever and innovative ways to, one, build more housing and supply, but also diversifying what we have. So I don't agree with the idea of leaving it to the markets. And we do need to build that supply as well.
Ivana?
Our province has a deficit of $420 billion. We cannot continue to keep throwing money at problems and not coming up with effective, efficient, and affordable solutions that will be paid on the backs of our grandchildren.
Okay, the next question, Dennis, I know that you have addressed this, but maybe you have more to say on it. Gas
Always.
prices have spiked in recent months, now rising above $2 per liter. What can the province do to address this issue in both the short and long terms?
Thank you very much, Lisa. So yes, I have mentioned this. I think from the long terms, really, it's once again kind of leaning into the idea of a green economy and not doubling down on fossil fuels. When I think about what the community that I want with regards to Newmarket-Aurora, for my kids, for my grandkids, really, I don't really picture fossil fuels as being a huge part of that. And I think there's a definite innovation that we can lean into so that we can be part of that cutting edge economy. And the Ontario NDP will be leaning into that to build for an economy of the future. With regards to right now for tomorrow, we would be regulating gas prices and the idea to make sure that the profits that the gas companies are having right now do not continue, so that there's fair transparency with regards to that.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, my apologies, Carolina. I should have given you a heads up before that
That's
you were
okay,
also
I
in on
assumed.
this question.
I assumed. I don't disagree with much of what Dennis said. I think we need a quick and efficient transition into green energy, far away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible, to get those fossil fuel companies out of our pocket and out of regulating the prices for us. We need to make sure that we are able to not only drive on clean energy, but also reduce the cars on the road by investing in our public transit, our walkable communities, and making them more connected in that way. The green economy will bring many more jobs than the fossil fuel companies will. Right now, we will lose about 50,000 jobs to the fossil fuels, but we will gain 160,000 jobs in Ontario to green economy. So it's easy. We need to switch.
Thank you. And Dennis, if you have anything further to add?
I agree. I think the big question here is, should our provincial government be lining the pockets and profits of fossil fuel companies, or should we be leaning into the future and trying to be part of that leading edge?
Okay, thank you.
This next question goes towards Sylvain. Dennis, you will have the chance to respond. Should the province of Ontario implement a basic income? And if so, how would it do so? Sylvain?
Your question is, should we have a basic income?
Yes, should we have a basic income? And if so, how to make it happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, the answer is yes. And I've been following that pilot before it was cut by the Conservative Party very attentively because I work with homeless people. We need to find ways to help society and help with those who don't have the means to live, have an income so they can have they can participate in life and so on. So absolutely, I would support it. I do think we need to study it because I think we need to look at scalability as well, and that might take a little bit of time, but fully support it.
All right, Dennis?
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest frustration with me as a researcher, as a scientist in the community, was that there are always questions about people, oh, like, how can we afford this? Is this really what's good for the community? And I think that the basic income guarantee study that was happening was something that was going to provide us the evidence to say, yes, this is good and this we can move this forward. So when the Conservative government took power in 2018 and then axed this idea, I guess, study, the sample that was going to provide the evidence, it's like you are putting us back 4, 8, 10 years ago with regards to this, and we can't advance the conversation. I think we should be advancing the conversation with science.
Thank you, Dennis.
Sylvain?
I just want to add that there are many indirect benefits of having a basic income program, including healthcare, the downstream effect of it. So folks who are in a basic income program will less likely utilize our healthcare system, require less need of mental health services and so on. So there's definitely a lot
Thank you,
in
Sylvain.
that. Thank you.
Thank you. My next question is between Ivana and Carolina. What can or will your party do to incentivize the development of purpose-built rental housing in York Region? And we start with Ivana.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. What can or will your party do to incentivize the development of purpose-built rental housing in York Region?
Well, again, what we need to look at, we need to approach this from a grassroots perspective. We have rental housing that is open to the public that should be housing individuals that are in need of this housing. We can look at the infrastructure that is already available to us and make it more efficient and effective for the communities that it's intended to serve.
Thank you, Carolina.
We need to ensure that that housing stays supportive and affordable to those people that are in need of it. We can't just assume that it will and trust our markets to do so. We need to actually put our foot in there and make sure that we keep those housings for the people that need it. So we will fund new supportive housing as well as renew the ones that already exist and ensure that individuals are able to stay there who need it and have access to services that they need as well, because it's not only that they have a home, but they need to be able to have public transportation to their jobs, to the doctor's office, to be able to have the services that they are in need of, and they need support from the government as well.
Thank you. And Ivana, if you have any last thoughts on that?
Yes, just to add to exactly what you're saying, we need to take also a grassroots approach to see where the cracks are in the system so we can make the systems that we already have in place more efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now we're ready for our second snapper of the evening, and I'm going to turn it over to Joseph.
This one goes a little bit into democracy. Would you support the direct election of the York Region Chair by voters in a municipal election? Yes or no answers only, please, starting off with Carolina.
Yes.
Sylvain,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
and Ivana.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Now for the third theme of the evening, and it's the economy. And asking the first question for all candidates will be Joseph.
Thank you. Many businesses and individuals are still recovering from the pandemic, having to rely on loan programs to get by during shutdowns. How will your party address pandemic recovery in the months and years ahead? Starting off with Carolina.
Yes, businesses suffered throughout the pandemic, as well as the individuals who run those businesses. And while the Ford government was benefiting the big box stores, the small businesses in our communities, the backbone of our communities, were suffering. So to come out of this pandemic, we need to make sure that we take care of them, that we ensure they have proper funding to be able to support themselves in a lower capacity of work or with lower number of customers or patrons that visit their businesses. We need to also remove some of the red tape for small businesses to be able to file easily for bankruptcy if they need to do so and without the pain that will cause in the current system, or to support them in creating new businesses, which will also be part of our 15-minute communities, which will ensure that more small businesses appear within our communities regardless of the zoning.
Thank you. Ivana?
During COVID, we lost 700,000 private sector jobs. We need to look at stimulating the economy. We need to look at reducing the provincial sales tax from 8 to 5% to stimulate consumer spending. We need to reduce the provincial corporate tax rate for small businesses from 12.2% to 10% to grow, attract, and expand businesses in Ontario, and cut the EHT by 50% until employment and GDP numbers reach pre-COVID levels. Thank you.
Dennis?
Thank you, Joseph. I think everything that Ivana has said would be great if we could trust the markets. And my biggest concern is that these benefits that we might make to help stimulate the economy would not flow down to the everyday Canadians with regards to the benefits of higher wages and the ability to have a job that pays the bills. I think the big thing we have here is that we are stronger as a community, and we have to support our local businesses because they make up parts of our community. So one of the biggest things that the Ontario NDP party will do is the money that was provided for COVID relief to help with local businesses. We're going to make sure that that actually flows through. So over the next 2 years, we're committed to 2 grants to see that money flow to continue to help local businesses recover.
And Sylvain?
Yeah, and I agree that businesses have definitely suffered, and we have to really pay attention to that, because ultimately it's the backbone of our economy, of our society. So we're definitely going to be pushing for to remove the corporate tax, for example, for small business that were really hit hard by the pandemic, and keeping that off for 2 years, just give them an opportunity to have a breather there. Eliminate incorporation fees, for example, for startups. But the other thing I want to remember too is businesses are nothing without employees who actually work in them. And for businesses to be successful, we have to be able to support workers throughout the challenges of the pandemic as well. They've had struggled immensely as well. So the idea of that, even out of paid sick days, for example, or portable benefits, if the employees show up, businesses will succeed. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Lisa will now ask the first face-to-face question of this section.
Okay, and my question is between Dennis and Ivana. Will you and your party commit to financial supports being announced concurrently with any future lockdown should we see future waves of COVID-19? And we're going to start with Dennis.
Yes, we would concurrently announce, I guess, the financial supports with other future lockdowns. I think the big thing for me is I'm hoping that we won't have to have that opportunity. We are 3 years into this pandemic. And the unfortunate thing with regards to the Ford government is I feel like we're in the exact same position that we were a year ago. We haven't really progressed with regards to any of the improvements or preventions that we could have done, such as improving the ventilation within public enclosed spaces, including schools. So the Ontario NDP is going to move forward with that and put the investment into our communities to, for example, in schools, commit to improve the ventilations within those communities and within those public buildings.
Thank you. Ivana?
I have to agree with Dennis in that this pandemic proved that lockdowns were not effective. We look at countries like Sweden that had the same outcome we had without the lockdowns and didn't harm the economy to that extent. So hopefully we will not be in a position where we have to consider this as even an option, and hopefully we have learned from this pandemic and we will not be putting this country into another number of years of house arrest.
Okay. And Dennis, final thoughts to you.
As a public health epidemiologist, I believe that there's a time and place for lockdowns. I think with regards to the businesses, the biggest thing is clear, consistent, transparent communication and not flip-flopping based on what the most recent poll suggests.
Thank you. This next question goes to you, Ivana, and Carolina, you will have the chance to respond. How do you plan to ensure business confidence and predictability for 2022 and 2023?
By doing, I mean, I'm pretty much going to answer this question like I just answered it, and it is by reducing the provincial sales tax from 8 to 5% to stimulate consumer spending. We are going to give tax incentives to small businesses to help them flourish and to create a province where we welcome businesses and welcome businesses to grow. That is the only way that we can ensure a prosperous future for Ontarians.
Thank you. Response, Carolina?
Yeah, I think we need to ensure that we support our small businesses and our local businesses as well by ensuring that we have the transparency for them to actually support them adequately. We will also be expanding the staycation tax to restaurants and gyms so that they're able to use that and fund themselves, fund that, have that influence to bring more patrons to them as well and make it easier for people to be connected within their communities and their small businesses. We need to also support the workers that work within those businesses and be able to provide them with paid sick leave that they would need if they were to come in contact with another pandemic or another disease that they can't surpass. Without workers, we don't have businesses, and the government needs to support both workers and businesses.
In closing to you, Ivana?
I agree. We need to support the employees as well as support the small businesses and larger businesses, but we also need to create a situation where businesses want to have their industry set up in Ontario. And by putting all this red tape around them, we are causing industry to move out of Ontario, which is preventing job creation in the first place.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is between Sylvain and Dennis. What measures will your government implement to ensure that businesses in Ontario do not face future lockdowns? And Sylvain, we're going to start with you.
Lockdowns served a purpose, but ultimately it created a lot of challenges for businesses, no doubt there. But I think at the end of the day, communication is going to be key. Unpredictability was really high. Again, Dennis mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of back and forth in the business world. People didn't know where to go for information, and oftentimes there was conflicting information. So absolutely, we need to focus on communications from government, making very clear to businesses in terms of what's coming down the pipe in terms of, and if there's another pandemic or this one seems to come back, we need to be prepared for it.
Okay, Dennis?
I think some of the concrete things that the Ontario NDP party will move forward with is the idea that we want to make a safe environment for the community, including our small businesses. If people feel safe, if people feel like they are not going to be able to transmit the virus, then that will naturally bring everyone together and help start the economy. So I would say that we're looking to help small businesses, local businesses, with regards to funding to help improve their ventilation systems. As a public place, I should be able to go into a store without feeling that I might be at risk, right? And I think those are the things the province could be doing at a provincial level to help create that safe environment.
Okay, and Sylvain, final thoughts go to you.
There's so much more we could be doing to help businesses, and that's an interesting measure that I would be interested to learning more about. I'd be interested to see what we could actually do to improve ventilation, but that might be a challenging one. Supporting businesses to do that, what kind of relief might be needed? Something I'd be definitely interested in looking into.
Okay, thank you.
This next question will go back to you, Sylvain, and Carolina, you'll have the chance to respond. An Ontario economic survey found that over 60% of businesses are experiencing labor shortages and expect to continue to face them over the next year. How do you plan to address these long-standing shortages that have been worsened by the pandemic? What are your plans to support the workforce of the future? Sylvain?
I could probably start in the healthcare workforce. We've seen firsthand teachers, healthcare workers, and so on leave the workforce because of the working conditions people were working in. So addressing those working conditions, that communication that's needed, and respecting workers in that environment will be a start. I think wages are an important factor as well in healthcare. The bill, there's been a bill that's been disastrous. That should have never happened. So remuneration is going to be key as well. And then the last piece will be about training the workforce as well, because we do need more workers. There's the ability as well to perhaps invite international workers in the country as well, a measure to explore. But that said, we need to invest in college and universities and invest in training people.
Rebuttal, Carolina.
Yeah, I don't have much to disagree with that, but I'll just add a little bit. I think workers need to be enticed to come to work and to actually work in reasonable conditions under a fair pay. So we would increase the minimum wage to make sure that everyone is paid fairly for the work that they do. $1 a year until we reach a salary that is a livable wage. We would also address the nurse shortages here. We will invest in their training and education to make sure that we have more nurses and doctors to fill in those vacancy spots, as Sylvain mentioned, in the healthcare industry. We will also invest in our new green economy education programs by providing a free year of tuition to those who are looking to find jobs in a green economy and to move that toward our job growth.
Final thoughts, Sylvain?
There's the other sectors as well that we can't forget. We have labor shortages everywhere, and I think there has to be a way for us to start working from province to province, and also even in North America, and look at perhaps helping folks come to Canada if they want to have an opportunity to work in this country.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Lisa will now pose the third snapper question of the evening.
Would you repeal Bill 124, the cap salaries for nurses? Yes or no only, please. Ivana,
Yes.
Carolina,
Yes.
Sylvain,
Yes, I just thought maybe we should all say yes at the same time for that one.
and Dennis, you want to?
Heck yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Well, congratulations. You've come around the back stretch and you're now in the home dash. Our next theme is the environment. Lisa will ask the first question.
Do you believe that climate change is one of the biggest threats to our future? If so, can you outline how your party plans to implement tangible change to mitigate it? And we will start with Ivana.
Yes, the environment is a huge concern for everybody, but it is also something that needs to be looked at on a global, federal, provincial, and local level. On a local level, we need to tighten regulations to ensure that we have clean air, purified water, and soil that is free of contaminants. We can do this on a local level through regulation and through enforcement. And if we take a grassroots approach and we protect our green spaces, we encourage constituents to plant trees and give tax incentives for community-based environmental progress, then we can work towards a cleaner and greener future.
Thank you. Dennis, you're up next.
Yes, this is something that is the biggest thing that's facing us right now. I'm not sure about you, but I don't know where I would live if I don't have an earth to live in. I think the biggest thing is we should have been addressing this 4, 8, 20 years ago. We know what we need to do. Now it's about having the political will to move forward with regards to moving our economy, moving towards a green economy. So this is one of those examples where I kind of think about, we need to think about the accountability and the previous actions of governments. They have made promises, and the question is, have they kept them? And are we making the progress that we need? I think the answer is no. And the Ontario NDP party has that political will to move forward at the progress and at the rate that we need to make our 2050 commitments.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Sylvain.
Yeah, I agree with some of the comments that were said. I remember vividly living through forest fires growing up, many of them, and increasing in intensity and frequency. And my dad had to go out there and fight those fires. And I remember those going, that the worries that come with that. So absolutely, I think we have to, we're in the middle of a crisis right now. We have to double down on this cause and really start working together. It's a global issue. You've mentioned that, but locally there's a lot of things our government could be doing. And some of the tangible things that you've asked is really about us focusing on reducing emissions, for example. Transit's come up before as well, and encouraging people to use public transit more and more. So there's, we could plant more trees. There's a lot of things we could be doing, but we have to do it now.
Thank you. And Carolina, we'll wrap up this question with you.
Yes, the climate crisis is the biggest issue of my lifetime. It's the reason why I'm on this stage today in front of you, because the climate crisis will affect me directly. I will not have a home if the things continue the way that they have been doing. Our governments have lagged far too long on action on the climate, and we need to be net zero by 2045. We need quick transition away from fossil fuel plants, cars, transportation services. Everything needs to be away from fossil fuels. We need new renewables. Renewables are not the future, they're the present. They're cheap and affordable, and we're able to implement those if government is willing to do that. We need to also invest in the people by making sure that people are set up for a green economy and new green jobs, by investing in the education systems that we have for a green economy. A green economy will be more affordable, hands down, and we need to
Thank
make
you,
sure
Carolina.
that we prioritize it.
We're now into the face-to-face, and Joseph will ask our first question.
This question goes to you, Carolina. Dennis, you will have the chance to reply. How will your party eliminate carbon sources in Ontario's power generation?
We will stop building fossil fuel plants, and we will quickly begin to phase those out of our circulation by investing in our renewable resources, which we can have locally and independentize our own energy sources, which will not only bring us more stability and accountability, but it will bring us more profit as well as a province. We will reduce the need for cars by connecting our communities through public transit, through electrified vehicles, walking trails, and other methods of mobilization that don't depend on a car. We will also be able to retrofit our homes, which will reduce the utility bill significantly by depending not on fossil fuels, but our renewable electricity. We will also stop investing in our uranium plants and our uranium power, because it's frankly dangerous to keep hiding and keep covering up. So we need
Thank
to
you,
move away from
Carolina.
Dennis, response?
So this is my third, I guess, debate with Carolina and Sylvain. And I find that there's a lot of similarity, a lot of overlap here. I would agree with a lot of what Carolina has said as the Green Party candidate. And I think this is where it's great how we're pushing each other with regards to what we actually need to do. The big thing for us is I think it's the province's responsibility to not retreat from responsibility, not point us in the wrong direction like the Ford government has and kind of bring us back to fossil fuels. But the responsibility of government is to make the environmental choice the easy choice. And that's something that I can't do with $120.
Final thoughts, Carolina?
Yep, I agree.
Thank you.
Okay. My question is with Sylvain and Ivana. Would you support a mandate that solar panels be included in every residential and commercial building constructed in the future to support green energy? Sylvain.
I would certainly support the transition and investing in solar panels, because the sun's going to be there for a long time. We can rely, it's reliable energy. That transition can be done and it will take some time, but it's worthy investment.
Okay, Ivana, you're next.
I think we need to have a common sense approach. I think we need to, I think maybe as a long-term goal, there would be some benefits to it, but we need to realize that new green technologies are appropriately applied in the short term in certain places, but in the long term, we have to look at the sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. So certain things work well in one area, not another. If we put that extra cost on businesses, we're going to be driving businesses out of Ontario. We need to have long-term plans to move to green technologies, but this is not going to happen overnight. And if we put more red tape on businesses, we'll be driving businesses out of Ontario.
Thank you,
and
Ivana.
it's not the end goal.
This is where I think government has a role to play to incentivize and provide some rebates and so on to encourage the transition. I don't believe solar panels will put business out of business, but I do believe there's like you that it's going to take time. We have to build towards that, and I do believe that the government has a role to play to make sure that can happen.
This next question goes to you, Dennis, and Sylvan, you'll have the chance to respond. The previous provincial government has faced criticism for the overuse of ministerial zoning orders, or MZOs, to decide land use and accelerate the planning process. How would your party use these orders? How should the province guide land use decisions in York Region? Dennis?
MZOs. Okay. So this was meant to be a tool of last resort, not a tool of first resort to avoid ecological assessments, to avoid consulting with the public, I guess, bypass the expertise that is, I guess, in municipal governments with regards to planning the communities they want at the local level, right? I think with regards to the use of the MZOs, I would try the NDP, the Ontario NDP would be looking to put the power and the autonomy of decision-making back to the local municipalities, because they're urban planners, the experts in planning and designing complete communities, especially in the town of Richmond Hill. I think they had a great plan that the Conservatives just totally overran with no reason whatsoever.
Sylvain, response?
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I think MZOs are a bad thing right now. They're being overused in the wrong context. Our party is committed to putting an end to them and replacing it with a rule-based system. And I agree with Dennis that we have to work with municipalities because they know what the community needs, and we can work with them. But definitely, a rule-based system will probably have a better outcome.
Final thoughts, Dennis?
I think I'll pass. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and my question is directed to Carolina and Ivana. What specific plans does your party have to reduce carbon emissions? And do you support a tax on carbon? And we'll start with Carolina.
Yeah, so we need to transition away from fossil fuels. Simply do that. We will do that by electrifying our communities, our cars, our public transit systems, also making our communities more walkable and more transmittable without cars or public transit as well. We will be able to help people invest in the retrofits of homes so that it saves them money in the utility bill, on the monthly utility bill. We will also be able to shift away from fossil fuels by investing in our renewable resources of energy. Yes, we do support a carbon tax, because in transition away from the carbon tax is no longer even in the question because there's no carbon to be paid for. So by reducing our fossil fuels, we'll reduce the money that we spend overall. It's cheaper to function on renewable resources.
Okay. Ivana?
So we have a carbon tax that has increased the cost of food, increased the cost of transportation, and increased our cost of living. A substantial part of that carbon tax goes to curbing climate change, yet greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise. I think we need to use a common sense approach. Our province and our country still highly relies on fossil fuels. It is not going to be a short-term solution to move away from fossil fuels. We need to use green technologies where they're appropriate and understand that we are still heavily dependent on fossil fuels.
Carolina, it's to you.
Yeah, right now we are very dependent on fossil fuels, but we need to start now to stop being dependent on fossil fuels. This isn't something that we wait for. It's something that we should have done 10 years ago, and it's something that we need to do today.
Thank you, candidates. Our final snapper of the evening will be asked by Joseph.
The Upper York sewage solution has been proposed by York Region as needed for our future growth. Environmental groups and the Chippewas of Georgina Island have expressed concern about its potential impact to Lake Simcoe. Consecutive governments have failed to decide on this one way or another. If elected, would you support the Upper York sewage solution? Yes or no only, please, starting off with Dennis.
Yes or no only? Yes.
Ivana,
No.
Carolina,
A tentative no.
and Sylvain.
It would be a tentative yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidates. That's the end of the snappers for this evening. We thought we would end our evening with 2 questions for all candidates to answer. They're more general in nature, and again, candidates will have up to 45 seconds to respond. And asking the first of the 2 is Lisa.
With Election Day exactly 2 weeks away, what do you think the single most important issue for residents to consider while casting their ballot is? Candidates have 45 seconds to respond, and we start with Sylvain.
I think it's going to be all about affordability. We've seen the prices soar out of control. Groceries are more expensive than it used to be. Housing is more expensive than it used to be. Transportation has gone off. So I think people are really gravitating towards the parties that will have solutions that are both short-term and long-term to address the affordability crisis we have on our hands today. And like we've talked about housing before, we've talked about other measures as well, but I think that's going to be the one thing people will be looking at this in this election.
Okay, thank you. Ivana, next. You.
I think if we look at trends in people leaving this province and leaving this country and how unhappy they have been over the last 2 years being kept in house arrest, I think government overreach is a big issue in this upcoming election.
Okay, thank you. Carolina?
I think transparency. Over the past 4 years, we've had a government that has told us some things, but done others. So we need to ensure that we have transparency and build the trust that we have lost over the past 4 years in our communities. So to do that, we need to be real with our communities and involve them in the process. Our municipalities have been neglected and abandoned and stepped over, and we can no longer do that.
Okay, thank you. And Dennis?
I think the big question here is, what do we want Newmarket-Aurora to look like 20, 30, 40 years from now? And are we on track to get there? Looking at the candidates here on stage, I've had a chance to kind of listen to them. I think we're in really good hands here. And I know that regardless of the results from June 2nd, whether it is working with Sylvain from his home in Scarborough, whether it's working with Carolina and wherever she finishes her university degree, whether it's working with Ivana right here in Aurora, I think that we definitely have candidates here that we can work together for the betterment of Newmarket-Aurora for the now and in the future. And for those candidates that are not here, I hope to have the chance to have an opportunity to talk to you to see how we can work together as well.
And for the final snapper, final question of the evening, we have Joseph.
Political discourse has deteriorated over the past few decades. What will you do personally to raise the bar in how our politicians and parties interact with each other? Starting off with you, Dennis.
I think the big thing really is just showing up and being accountable. I know that when I've been knocking on doors, I have spent the time to talk with people that are not natural NDP voters, because I really want to figure out what is motivating them and how, if I'm tapped on the shoulder on June 2nd, how I'm going to represent them, because we're going to be electing a new MPP, and that MPP should be representing those who vote for them, those who don't vote, those who can't vote for them. So for example, I know that Ivana, who I met today, is a great candidate because I was hearing it from the community as well. Okay, I've had the personal experience with Sylvain and Carolina here. I know that we can work together, and I think that's how we kind of raise the discourse of actually working together instead of vilifying other parties and saying orange good, blue bad.
Thank you. Next up, Carolina.
Yeah, I think a lot of the way that we have elected our officials has been a bit difficult, and people have felt discouraged by the electoral system itself because it might not be representative of the way that you actually want to vote, and you just feel like you need to pick the lesser of two evils. So to be able to surpass that and build the party lines so that we can discuss between each other and not necessarily be so hard in our ways that we can't even have a conversation and speak with one another about the issues that are most important and find creative new ways to solve old problems.
Ivana, you're up.
I have to agree with Dennis. Door knocking, you realize really our voice is there to represent the community. And I think we all need to align for the greater good and represent our constituents in provincial parliament. I think these party lines and these divisions that have been created in public discourse over the past 2 years need to be moved away from, and we need to be able to have civil conversations between party lines and have that discourse so we can properly represent our constituents in provincial parliament. And we see that a lot of people, because of the fact that we've been silenced in a lot of ways and prevented from having open conversations, feel very disempowered this coming election. And it's important to make people feel empowered again.
And finally, Sylvain.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I think elected officials need to show up. They need to work hard. They need to listen to the community, what matters to them, and they need to be able to be advocating for the local needs at the provincial level. I've been discouraged by a lot of the us versus them mentality that we've seen emerge over the last few years, particularly on social media. And it doesn't serve anybody. And at the end of the day, whoever is elected and representing at Queen's Park need to be able to work across party lines to work on common issues like healthcare, like seniors care, mental health. These are not even political issues. They should just be issues that everybody agrees that we need to work on and address because it's for the good of the people.
Well, I'd like to begin the end by saying thank you to all of our candidates. This is a very tough job to be in front of an audience and to answer difficult questions. And you've done a wonderful job tonight. And I also would like to thank you for just putting your names forward and getting involved. Leadership is about service, and you are offering yourselves to serve our community. And for that, I would like to ask all of us to give a big round of applause to our candidates. I'd also like to thank all of you who came out this evening and everyone at home. Thank you for participating in this. Big round of applause for yourselves. And I don't think I need to tell any of you who are here that participation in elections is critically important. With all the strife that's happening in the world today, it is important that we reflect on the fact that we do have the right to vote. So please exercise that right. Please vote on June 2nd. And to wrap up, I'll say candidates will be available in the lobby to answer questions. I want to thank our organizing partners, the Newmarket Chamber of Commerce, Newmarket Today, and YorkRegion.com. Thank you all very much and have a wonderful evening, and best of luck to the candidates.
Thank you.
Thank you.